All right, thanks for sticking with us, people. Before when we went to break, we mentioned Pax Americana. We're going to summarize the last segment with these guys and move on to some real important stuff.
Yeah, we got off into kind of a tirade about some very important things, but for the importance of the time that we have here tonight, I would like you watching to get a pen and paper, write down PNAC, Project for a New American Century, Able Danger, Vulgar Betrayal. Those are two intelligence operations that were ongoing that were killed. And just Google 9/11 war games to find out about some of the operations occurring on 9/11, the actual day. Operation Northern Vigilance, Biowarfare Exercise Tripod 2, Operation Vigilant Guardian, Operation Northern Guardian, Operation Vigilant Warrior. These are all things you will find once you get down to it. We're going to get into some more information now, and we're going to go actually into debunking the official conspiracy theory, which is the 9/11 Commission report, the lies that the government, the distortions, the omissions that they have presented to the people as justification for the murder of 3,000 Americans and so many more casualties in the wars that have followed. So I'm going to pass it off to Chris, and he's going to go into something.
Okay, I guess we're going to get into the 9/11 Commission report, the theory that 19 men in caves made the largest aero defense system in the world stand down for 2 hours, when NORAD the year before had been 20 for 20 in intercepting planes, and they failed 4 times that day. For those of us with any just common sense logic, these things don't add up. We also have things that were left out of the 9/11 Commission report, things like the fact that General Mahmoud Ahmed from Pakistan was in Washington on 9/11 the week before. He wires $100,000 to lead hijacker Mohammed Atta. Not important. When the 9/11 Commission investigates that, they said that they found the funding of the 9/11 attacks were of no practical significance. That it didn't matter who paid for it, whether it was Saudi Arabian princes, Pakistani generals, or people out of the Pentagon, and that's probably why they found it of no significance, because it would implicate the people behind it. More importantly, they left out things like Building 7, a 47-story skyscraper, which would be the tallest standing building in 33 of the 50 United States, and it falls into its own footprint neatly, not damaging any buildings next to it, in 6.5 seconds, as fast as you could drop a pool ball off the top of it and hit the ground. I'm sorry, folks, but when buildings come down with concrete and steel below them, they don't just float down like pool balls. They're gonna boom, boom, boom. There's no nice, quiet little
I'd like to make a comment on that, Chris. I'm thinking plane flies into a tower, hits the 78th floor, you know, between the 78th and 81st floor. There's fires billowing away in the thing. I could see, you know, physically if that top chunk of the building, you know, maybe tumbled off and took out a couple buildings along the way, well, and then the rest of it would be left flaming and smoking and what have you. I don't understand how it came down like that.
Well, sure, buildings have collapsed in that fashion before from, you know, collateral damage. But as far as purely from steel, the first 3 times in history that a steel structure fell was on 9/11. And then Building 7, which was not mentioned in the 9/11 Commission report, it held the files for the SEC. It held the biggest CIA office outside of Washington. It held the Secret Service office. It also held all of the Security and Commission's criminal files for things like Enron and WorldCom, which went back, if you want to look into it, to all the way to collapsing the Argentinian economy, back with George W. Bush selling the Argentinian pipelines to Enron back in 1988. I mean, this goes back deep, all the way back to the Kennedy administration, if you even want to go that far.
I think one of the biggest smoking guns on 9/11, just sticking with the towers, how he just said that the plane hit between the 78th and 83rd floor. But there was a janitor by the name of William Rodriguez, who was in sublevel C on the day of 9/11, that testified to the 9/11 Commission report, which they didn't report on, that it wasn't just him by himself either. It was 6 other men corroborate his story that before the first plane hit, there was explosions in the basement, so powerful that they blew up a 4-ton press and melted some guy's face off and the skin on his arms hanging off. they failed to mention that. And then he also, after that happened, then he heard the plane hit. He heard another explosion way up at the top. But they don't mention that.
Well, and as well, William Rodriguez rescued firefighter John Schroeder from Ladder 10, who was the first fireman who called in the first plane hitting. Fireman John Schroeder has recently been railroaded out of the fire department, no longer works for the FDNY, but he has also come out and said he believes that there was government involvement on 9/11. The things that he saw, like coming out of the towers, and he said it looked like the plane hit the lobby. The windows were blown out, there were bodies in the lobby, there were things that just didn't add up for a catastrophe that happened 78 floors above.
Yeah. You can just type in, you can Google secondary explosions at the, on 9/11,
Watch the
and
testimony
you'll
of
find
firefighters.
testimony of not just firefighters. You'll find eyewitnesses. You'll find just live news reports all day.
Of policemen, of mainstream journalists. Who was the journalist out there that said I was hit by explosions? We heard multiple explosions in the buildings. The firefighters saying that when we heard the building coming down, it sounded like fireworks. Crack, 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 crack. You heard the columns collapsing.
And the squibs. Mention something about the squibs.
Oh, the demolition explosions. If you compare what happened on 9/11 to photographs of other demolitions and implosions that can only be done by a handful of companies in the world on a structure that size, you will see what are called squib explosions, which are little puffs of smoke coming out a few floors below where it's collapsing. And what that's doing is cracking the core columns so the resistance is relieved so the tower can come down freely so you don't damage the buildings surrounding.
Right, and Lower Manhattan was covered with inches of dust, which is pulverized concrete and steel. And it's been analyzed by physicists and found to have evidence of thermite, or thermate, which is a demolition grade derivative.
It's a military incendiary that burns at a very hot temperature, up to in between 3,000 and 4,000 degrees, and it melts steel.
See, but
on
again, now
contact.
we're getting into the specifics, which is what researchers like ourselves talk about amongst ourselves. The real question that's raised by this is, why do we know all this and it wasn't discussed by the 9/11 Commission?
This concludes this program broadcast. We the People, a freedom of speech television show. Go to www.wethepeopleofri.org.